Today I want to talk about my 4 tips for personal branding for busy professionals. Grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. If you are a particularly busy professional, I'm going to guess that your career is likely on the rise and that you understand already the power of personal branding. But it's one thing to understand personal branding and it's another to find yourself being able to make time to build your personal brand, build your professional personal brand. So today I want to make personal branding simple, particularly for busy professionals. I just want to give you the most straightforward tips that you can to start to build your personal brand in your industry and in your career so that you can build your personal brand while you are actually working in your 9-to-5 job instead of ignoring that opportunity that you have altogether. Believe me, I understand being a busy professional. In my previous corporate life, I used to have sometimes up to 9 meetings a day. I used to also work on the weekends. I used to have a pretty active social life as well, and sometimes I was studying in that period too. I understand that feeling of overwhelm and of burnout well. So the tips that I'm going to share with you today are designed to be a much more sustainable approach to building your personal brand. So let's get into tip number 1. My tip number 1 is to pick a platform. Now, when you hear a lot of tips and advice on personal branding, you are likely going to hear that you have to be everywhere and you have to be on all of the platforms. And I understand where this advice comes from because that is the ideal. You want to meet your audience where they are on those different platforms or how they like to consume their content. But when you are trying to build your personal brand online as a busy professional, it's one thing to understand the ideal and it's another to actually be able to execute on that in a sustainable way. So my approach would be to pick a platform. And this was something that really resonated with me when I read Mike Kim's book, You Are the Brand, where he talks about strategizing like a Chinese zodiac. In that context, he's talking about building a business like a Chinese zodiac. And he uses this idea of the year of. So, for example, this might be the year of YouTube, or the year of blogging, or the year of LinkedIn. And the idea is that you focus on this particular priority for a year, like a Chinese zodiac theme, and you learn to master that platform before you move on to the next platform. And that is something that I find really interesting. So you might decide to just pick one platform and stick to that, or you might want to eventually find a way to be on multiple platforms, whether it is LinkedIn, YouTube, podcasting, Instagram or TikTok, whatever that might be. But this gives you a sustainable way to be able to get there. So you can build that muscle for creating content online in a slower approach that allows you to be able to integrate those habits into your life and see what works for you before just trying to be on every platform and trying to be everything to everyone. And it also is a way that you can start to master particular platforms. You start to get more knowledgeable about a particular platform if you have a priority for that year. So how do you pick the platform, though, that you are going to be on? As I mentioned, there are several options. When it comes to your professional brand, I know that the obvious choice for a lot of people for their career brand is going to be LinkedIn. As I mentioned on this channel a lot, it is the largest social networking platform for professionals, as I'm sure you know. But keep in mind that LinkedIn isn't necessarily a one-size-fits-all for everyone. So pick a platform that is actually where your audience is most likely to be. So where do they hang out? If you are looking for people in your industry, if you're looking for clients or customers, what is the platform that they are most likely going to be engaging with? And try and make that your priority. But an element that you want to consider as well is the platform that you also enjoy showing up on. So when it comes to producing any sort of content for your social media platforms or your digital platforms, it is a little bit of a commitment. So you want to make sure that you are not just committing to that particular platform, but you are committed to that process. And you're only going to be committed to that process if you enjoy that process. So if, for example, you have a way with words and you love to write, then consider building out your blog or consider writing articles on LinkedIn. If you are someone who likes the spoken word more, then YouTube or podcasting might be a better pick for you. If you are a really visual person, maybe Instagram suits you. And if you like really short and snappy short form content, maybe it's something like TikTok. So think about the process that is involved in the platforms that you are considering and ask yourself if you would actually enjoy showing up in that process before you actually make that commitment. And then you can find a sustainable way to integrate that into your routine. Tip number 2 is document, don't create. This is some of my favorite advice from the marketing guru, Gary Vee. And what I love about this, as I've mentioned a few times on this channel, is that it just takes the pressure off of creating. So you don't have to think about showing up on social media or on your digital platforms as this creator. You don't even need to think of yourself as a creator, as I'm sure a lot of us don't. You can just be documenting along the way. You can be learning out loud. You can be practicing in public. What I really like about this document, don't create approach is that you are essentially documenting what you do anyway. So just to give you a few sort of straightforward examples, imagine you are someone who works in, say, fashion. Maybe it is a part of your job that you get dressed up every day and you look incredible, but you just head out the door and you get to your desk and you just grind it out for your 9-to-5 job, and then you head back home and you relax. This is a way to just think about what you're already doing a little bit differently. So if you do work in fashion and you have put in all of that effort to look great every single day, then why not have something that relates to, say, taking a photo of yourself in your outfit every day? I know that's a really basic example, but it just shows you how you can document what you're doing for a personal brand that is a really just sort of personal instead of, really authoritative approach to your personal brand. So I think it's just a nice way to leverage something that you do anyway. And maybe you are also a creative person, say a designer or something like that, and you work on these really visually lovely projects every day. So why not just document that as you go? Just take a few minutes to snap a photo and make that a part of your strategy instead of trying to think of something that is really elaborate as a part of your personal brand strategy. So essentially you are giving people a behind the scenes look into your life. You're giving them a peek behind the curtain without having to put in so much of that elaborate effort into, long articles or videos or things like that. Or if you even wanted to do that, just keep that document, don't create mantra in mind so that you are actually just tapping into what you're doing already. Which leads nicely into tip number 3, which is expanding on what I just mentioned, and that is to leverage the everyday. So when you are really caught in this 9-to-5 grind, particularly if you are a busy professional, it's really easy to start to think about your normal as being the normal of everyone, when that probably isn't the case at all. So what might be your everyday that you find maybe mundane or you just think is completely just ordinary for what you would normally be doing might be something that people find really fascinating. And you might have people in your audience or in your network who would love a behind the scenes look into what a job like yours really looks like. So I'm just expanding on that, documenting a bit more. So for example, instead of just sort of the superficial elements of your role, you might look at, sharing more about the processes behind what you do. Again, this for your personal brand can show a behind the scenes look. It shows more of the expertise that you bring to your particular field in a way that's still really engaging for your audience. But documenting the everyday can also just be kept really light as well. And, for example, if you are jumping from meeting to meeting all the time, maybe you're in the office, maybe you're in other offices, maybe you have lots of cafe coffees with people, it's just a chance to take people along that journey of what your everyday looks like. I think this is why people are so fascinated by mini vlogs. There's just something I find that I always love about watching someone's routine. It's one of my favorite things. So think about your own routine and where you might actually be taking something for granted that someone else might find interesting. And at the very least, it's almost a little bit of a gratitude practice. If you start to get into these habits of snapping photos and actually being present in that moment, appreciating, the coffees that you have with people, the offices that you get to go to, it gives you a chance to stop and acknowledge that moment that may have just become an everyday aspect of your career that you don't stop to appreciate anymore. So that's just another thing that I like about leveraging the everyday. But having said all of that, this doesn't need to just be about your online personal brand. As I talk a lot on this channel about, your personal brand is equally about your offline presence. It's how you show up as a person in face-to-face and everything that comes with your offline personal brand too. So for example, if you are someone who is constantly going from meeting to meeting, you have all of these interactions with people, do you actually stop to make those relationships a little bit more in depth? Do you actually stop to, see what you can do to maybe organize a networking event and connect people to other people in your network? Or do you even stop to make sure that you have all of those people on your LinkedIn? I, for example, only, as I've mentioned on this channel before, started using LinkedIn much later in my career than I probably should have. So I was meeting people all the time, but I was never connecting with them online. And so it's just a chance for you to stop and think about if you're actually leveraging all of those things that are a part of your everyday and extending that into a richer opportunity for your personal brand and for your career and your network in general, however that might look, and whatever opportunities you find in your everyday. And my tip number 4 is to automate everything that you can. If you are a busy professional, I'm going to guess that your days can look pretty chaotic as much as you might like to control your schedule. So it's one thing to tell yourself, I'm going to post every Tuesday afternoon on LinkedIn, and it's another thing where in reality you find yourself back to back in meetings for the entire afternoon, and that gets put on the back burner, and then you just end up not doing it and you're really inconsistent on social media. So I like the idea of automating everything that you can, because it means that you can use the downtime that you might have in your diary or in your personal life as well to set yourself up to be able to do those things. So use those hours or those even minutes that you have free to set up that thing that you want to go live on a particular day. Schedule that. Use the scheduling features that are available on a lot of platforms like LinkedIn, for example. So it doesn't require you having to be there at your desk to be able to share a post or to be able to share an article at the ideal time that you would like to do so. And this idea of automating everything was a really big theme in Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Work Week, which you may have read. And one of the really prevalent themes in that book is to work on your business, not in your business. And automating is a part of that strategy and doing that as much as you can as well. If you want to learn more about the new rich that Tim Ferriss does talk about in his book, then check out my previous episode on that topic. Thanks so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.